Hi, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our show. This is another edition of the Cronin Law Show and the Cronin Challenge to Change. Thank you so much for being with us. We are here to help support you, to motivate you, to guide you through these uncharted territory, this uncharted water that we've never seen before in our state or even globally. And we're here to help answer any questions that you might have from a legal perspective, from a pragmatics perspective. We want you to know that the Cronin Law Firm is here. And today with me, joining me, are my amazing colleagues and partners, Samantha Faulkner and Hugh Woodrow. And I'm going to be bringing them up to you today. And so excited that they're joining us and here to answer any questions that you might have. Hugh and Sam, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, we know that the governor is trying to extend her executive order again. Hugh, I know you're on top of this. What can you tell our viewers today about what they may anticipate and how that may affect them on a day-to-day basis?
Well, she actually hasn't issued any really new executive orders in the past week, which is new for her. The current one for the state of emergency is supposed to end on July 16th. I fully anticipate her extending it again. She won a bit of a victory in the federal court cases that the legislature, as well as the gyms, had filed against her in the state court case with the legislature, basically stating that her decision, or the decision from the lower court stating that she exceeded her power, has been appealed. The Court of Appeals is on a schedule to have that decision, whether they believe that she did or not, by August 27th. And then the Supreme Court of Michigan will probably end up taking that up as well, because whoever loses is probably going to ask the Supreme Court to look at it. And they've said that they probably won't have an opinion on until November, December of this year yet. So for the most part, the governor pretty much has a go-ahead from the courts to extend this at least until August 27th, in my opinion, which I fully anticipate she'll do, pending the Court of Appeals decision. But even when that comes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that her executive orders won't continue. Similar to what's going on with the case that all the gym people, all the gym owners have filed against her in the federal court system. The lower court ruled that the gyms can open and that she exceeded her power in doing that. The Court of Appeals at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, they agreed to hear the case and granted her motion to put the order, to stay the order closing the gyms until they do reach a decision. So even though the lower court said that the gyms can open, the Court of Appeals said we're going to put everything on hold until we make our decision. So that's why the gyms are still closed as we speak. So again, she kind of won a victory there.
And that came down just the night before the gyms were supposed to open.
Exactly.
And we do know there's a new law in place, and I don't know how new it is, but that masks are now legally required in all enclosed public places. Hugh or Sam, do you know when that law actually came down?
That was part of the executive order that's been upheld, basically. So it's been in place since it first came down back in April or May, but it's just been extended and, I guess, legalized by the court system, saying, yeah, they can now mandate that if they want to, which they've already done. So.
And now that we see that that establishments are reopening, that's why the law has been in place now. And it just has been noticed today that in the age group of 25 to 34 years of age, we have more COVID positive cases. Now, let us remind our viewers that just because someone is positive does not mean that they're showing signs of sickness or ill health. It just means that they could potentially be carriers for someone else to maybe contract the disease and then have those symptoms. So sometimes people get confused by the numbers, and I just want our viewers to be reminded that, positive doesn't mean deadly, right? to both of you.
No.
So, Sam, I know you are a mom and you have been staying at home now, especially more so because of the childcare issues. And back when schools were in place, like me, you had to homeschool and all of that. How is it affecting your role as a mom, and dealing with a younger person this summer, especially, and, having to, teach him that this is now your new normal?
It's difficult. I'm facing a whole new set of challenges as a mom. Some of the things that were challenges before are becoming easier, and there's a whole new set of challenges on, how do I maintain full-time workload and, continue to excel and do a good job for my clients and the firm, and at the same time provide structure for my child. I'm lucky that I just have the one. And he's like having a tiny roommate. So I'm very lucky in that regard that he's pretty easy.
He's not so tiny.
He's not so tiny, but
he's getting bigger and bigger.
Thank you. I know, but there's a whole different.
And he was just nominated by his peers as the captain of his team. So
yes,
shout out to that. That's awesome.
Thank you. We're very, very proud of him for that. He's stepped up to be a leader. Even in this, he offers to do things around the house. He did before, but it's even more so now. He argued with me yesterday about replacing the bag in the garbage can when I took the trash out. I said, "It's okay, buddy. I'll get it when I come up." "No, it's okay, Mom. I'll get it." And I'm like, "It's really okay." "No, it's okay. I'll get one out for you." I was like,
wow.
I'm gonna remember this.
Can you send them to my house to teach my kids how to do that?
Yeah, but it's hard because you want to maintain structure. Kids need structure and consistency, and that's very hard to do. And also, I have to work, and the nature of our work requires a lot of attention to detail. And there's a lot of reading, and so many emails to read and send and things like that. So it's hard. You want to find that balance between being a good parent and still doing good at your job, and that it's hard.
Right. It is very hard. And I know, I brought that up, Sam, and to you, Hugh, too. I know you're a dad of young women and you have, a lot going on in your household. But I bring that up because, we see so many family law cases. Our firm handles a wide variety of legal matters. Family law is a large part of our practice, as well as business, personal injury, and criminal law. But speaking to the family law side of the house, we have seen such a rise in domestic cases, and not just simple matters, very complex, very high conflict matters. And, Hugh, to your point about the executive orders and how this may be extended, and I know today our governor is talking today, and we have yet to have any structure moving forward for the fall. How do you think that this will affect families moving forward, and especially those having marital issues?
It's going to be very interesting. There are, one of the executive orders came down is the schools are required to have a return to school COVID plan in place, but it doesn't say what that plan's supposed to be. And she has opened up state funds to help these schools develop these COVID plans. As far as I know, they are very much leaning towards reopening and having in-person classes in the fall. But if we have a resurgence at the end of the summer before school opens, or even after it opens, it very well could shut down again almost immediately and be back to everyone staying at home and homeschooling. So, it's not easy on everyone. As Sabrina, I know you have children. I do. I know Sam does too. So, staying at home, trying to balance the work, child educational programs going on and keeping them tracked is very stressful. People's lives are usually stressful enough. You add in the added factor of keeping the kids home and trying to homeschool on top of your full-time employment. It makes it that much more difficult. And I think that's a definite reason why we're seeing this uptick in high conflict divorce cases. It doesn't seem like the ones that we've brought in lately, none of them have been easy. they've all been in high conflict. They really have. I mean, there's been some pretty serious major issues going on, and I think a lot of that is because of this added stress of being at home with the kids, being at home with your spouse permanently, and not being able to have that time away.
My fear is if the governor orders another stay home order, that like she did early on, I fear for the state of our state, truly, and the state of each and every one of us, because I believe that the ramifications will far outweigh the health problems due to COVID. Sam, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about what we were talking about with the, co-parenting and divorces and high conflict cases and domestic violence. And I think that crisis response, individual reactions to crisis are something, people fight mostly about money, I think. But crisis response in a family unit is something that is also can be very divisive. And I think that is something that's being brought out, whereas people are either rising to the occasion and they're setting aside their differences and they're learning how to co-parent better because they just simply don't have a choice, or they're exposing the cracks in the armor, so to speak, of what was going on, and things are starting to crumble, whether it's just a post-judgment co-parenting situation or a marriage that's going to be ending. So I think that crisis response, people have different opinions and different actions about what goes on. And I think that is really being highlighted here. To your question about how this will continue to impact things, people are tired of staying home. And it's, even if you know that it's the right thing to do to wear a mask or stay home, I mean, we're not really going to know what the right thing to do was until this is over, because it changes on a daily basis. But these imposed restrictions are adding mental stressors and emotional stressors and sometimes triggers for people that don't otherwise exist outside of a crisis like this. And it's really just making everybody kind of lose it a little bit.
Well, and it's unfortunate, and I just hope our state takes all of that into consideration. And, without getting political, obviously, we all have our own opinions, and we're all entitled to our own opinions, but to impose so many restrictions on those that really are healthy and maintaining self and safe practices, in my opinion, is not fair for the overall well-being of each and every one of us. And I do hope that there is a resolution here quickly and swiftly to try to bring about some healthy boundaries that can survive even this pandemic.
Yeah. So I think there's some other things just culturally in our society that need to change as well. Like, it's not in our firm, just to throw that out there. We don't have this problem, but in previous jobs, or like when I worked retail, for example, there was no calling off or having someone replace you on your shift if you're sick. There was no, it wasn't acceptable for you to have a weakness or something that like, hey, I don't feel good, I have a cold, I need to stay home. It was like, well, I need you here at 6 o'clock, so you better figure it out. So I think the attitude towards workplace sickness and it's become acceptable to just push through when you're having a sickness. So you have people that have COVID symptoms that are still going out in public, and they're not self-isolating, and they're not taking a break. And some of them can't financially. Some of them ran out of PTO, or, maybe they're the only provider for their household. But I think the attitudes towards recuperation and recovery from even minor illness, and even me, this is my own self-imposed with my work ethic, but if I'm sick, I just don't come to the office. I still work from home. I don't take a day off and rest. So I think that's detrimental to people too, because then you have this people with COVID symptoms going out and about, whatever they're doing, and they're not being careful. They're not going to get tested, and who knows how reliable that is anyways. But I think those are other things that people can be doing. Like, if you don't feel well, don't go to the barbecue. Don't go into work that day if you can help it,
Well, I liken it to, the flu. I mean, the numbers are almost the same. Um, Obviously the difference is the vaccinations, but even still, people with vaccinations get sick with the flu. It's not 100% cure all, but, people have to be smart. If they have the flu, they typically stay home. So, just be smart. And our numbers, reflect that. And so anyway, I do know that there are some other laws now too regarding, health professionals and undergoing some more training, especially now with respect to the race relations. More and more people are having, training for bias, and we see it more right now and with the health professions. And we also know some of it is to address racism in the Black community and the disparity of healthcare in the lower income areas. So I know we're kind of switching gears here in topics, but some of this goes to the training. And Sam, when you were talking about, employers and employees, and now employers are trying to, instead of forcing their employees to come to work, realize, hey, no, you need to stay home if you're sick. And also not only teaching employers how to be more effective in terms of employment issues and HR issues, they also need to teach them race relations. So it's almost, in the beginning of COVID, we did not expect, race relations to be so much at the forefront, but it really now is so intertwined. And Hugh, speaking to that, I know we do a lot of HR and employment matters. How can our employers and employees, just kind of arm themselves with more knowledge and make sure they're, crossing their T's and dotting their I's and making sure they're acting appropriately from both the employer perspective and the employee perspective?
When we were on last week with Brian, we kind of touched on this a bit, but there are orders out there again stating that if you are going to be opening to the public, whether you're retail or a restaurant or even in an office environment, you have to have a COVID plan in place. I mean, it's required. You have to have this. We've developed it for a number of our clients here, so that they have a COVID plan in place, which dictates, what you're supposed to do, reporting procedures, if you're sick, how you're supposed to quarantine the person, the use of personal protection equipment and stuff of that nature. So, I mean, if you don't have this COVID-19 plan in place, you better get one, because technically you're required to. As of June 1st, you were required to have it, or within 14 days of reopening, which we're past the 14 days of anybody reopening at this point, except for gyms. So, every employer should have one of these things in place. They have to be made available to the employee. And again, that kind of dictates what you're supposed to do and what your requirements as an employer are. And if you don't follow those requirements, then you could be opening yourself up to liability. I mean, I know that, like we've discussed many times, the causation effect. I mean, how can you prove that you got COVID at work if you get COVID? And, if your employer isn't following their COVID plan, isn't following the protocols they're required to make, I think you are opening yourself up to some liability there.
Yeah. And in terms of, race relations, Sam, what can you talk about that in terms of employer and employee issues?
I think it's important for both sides to remain open-minded, but I think it's also important for employers to examine their current practices and policies, and rather than trying to find a way to defend what they're doing, whether it's right or wrong, or whether it could be improved or not, I think we all could take a chance to be a little introspective and say, like, okay, well, I didn't think this was offensive, but it's been brought to my attention that it is. So what can I do to modify that? And would it really hurt me to listen to that, complaint or suggestion and make a change? Sometimes even just a rebranding of policies and procedures, re-rolling out updated policies and procedures could be enough to say, hey, we realize that, maybe this needed to be clarified or reworded in a way that is more accurately expresses the intent of the policy, rather than we threw it together, and or it was a generic boilerplate thing we got offline, and we realize now that this doesn't properly address our specific, staff needs or company position and things like that.
Right, right. So I do know that this morning, Governor Whitmer signed the new bill that all health professionals undergo implicit bias training. Do you think that this is going to be something that most employers will be required to do?
Yeah. I don't think there's any way around it with everything that's going on nationally right now, and with not necessarily just like you said, it's not just with police departments, which is going through a major overhaul, but also with healthcare professionals. I anticipate this going through the school systems as well. I mean, any pseudo government agency or business is going to have to deal with this for sure. And I think a lot of private companies will implement it as well, just because it makes sense. It's good policy.
Right. And how do you think that will affect, let's just say, law enforcement? You brought up a good point. They're talking about the defunding of police and the departments. I know from a practical standpoint, I think most people, when they hear defunding, they think, oh no, when I call 911, no one's going to respond to me. And that could be a very real ramification. So, how do you think that we can accomplish purposeful reorganization without the defunding?
That's one of the things I think our governor actually has gotten in the right. I mean, she put forth some new guidelines for our police departments within the state of Michigan regarding certain training, and almost every department across the country now has said you're not allowed to use the chokeholds and other ways of detaining people. So, I mean, there is a lot of change going on, a lot of good change going on to that regard, and hopefully it'll filter down to their, the training that the employees, the police officers, or whoever get in that regard. I think the funding's a bad idea. I think a reallocation of funds might be better, or a better term to use, because again, like you said, the funding, that's like, oh my God, you're not giving the police department money. Well, maybe you should have it so that their funding is set up. Okay, they have X number of dollars for this, but then they should also have some of that money set aside for diversity training, for proper hold training, proper detention training, rather than just taking the money away from them altogether, which I think is a mistake.
Well, and I also think, how we've seen a rise in violent family matters and disputes, because when people are stuck at home, they just don't know how to release a lot of this stress. And, I always say that stress is just when you are overwhelmed beyond your capacity. And I don't think law enforcement is any exception to that. And you have different people having different capacities for stress. What you might think is stressful, well, I might be able to tolerate, or vice versa. And I think with the police, I think some of the law enforcement officers can get overwhelmed easier than others. And I think when they are in a stressful situation, I think they need better training to learn how not to allow that overwhelm to overtake their senses and lash out when they shouldn't. And whether it's a racial bias or whether it's just stress, we don't know. Only you can get into that mind of the person and figure that out. But I know most people think it's more racially motivated. But I think proper training, proper education, proper emotional and mental psychological counseling is necessary for a lot of these long-term or even short-term law enforcement officers. So to your point, Hugh, I do believe that money should be allocated to that area of law enforcement. And I hope we see that.
Yeah. And, but a lot of people seem to fail to realize this. Police officers, just like everybody else, they're people. And right. Every person has a breaking point. And especially like you were saying, Sabrina, if you're in a stressful situation where there's one or two officers surrounded by 20, 30, 40 people, all seemingly out to get them or harassing them. I mean, it doesn't help the situation. And, you know, I look at some of these situations. I'm not saying I would react the same way, but to tell you the truth, I don't know if I would or not. I mean, I thankfully I've never been in that situation, so I don't know how I'd react. But you know, everyone's got a breaking point, and it might take years of building up little things over the years before they reach that breaking point, or it might happen within 5 minutes of an extremely stressful situation where they're surrounded by a mob throwing bricks at them. I mean, thankfully, the average person doesn't have to worry about that. Police do. I mean, especially now. I mean, how many times have you seen the police in the riot gear are trying to control a peaceful demonstration that turns unpeaceful in the blink of an eye? And rocks, bricks, bottle rockets, fireworks get launched at them, homemade grenades of tear gas or whatever get thrown back at them. I mean, that's enough to make most people snap.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, would you like to talk about this issue at all?
I just think defunding is the wrong word. I think whoever put that concept out used a bad word choice because I don't think that's the intent of it. And also, to your point, Hugh, ironically, the people in the riot gear that are stemming the tides of a major crowd situation have usually significant higher amounts of training, and those are typically not the people that are being complained about. So I get what you're saying, and I think that is a valid point. I think the situations that we're seeing that the community in general are having an outcry for are when you have 4 or 5 officers and one individual, whatever they look like.
Right.
Right. Also, I think the thing that people should remember is that the concepts that we discuss are not mutually exclusive, and one doesn't erase the other, and they don't exist in a vacuum. So it has to be looked at from a global perspective.
Sure.
Can you talk more about that, Sam?
What I'm saying is it's the whole concept of, you know, Black people have disparately been treated, and it's a systemic issue against people of color by systems, police, financial, you know, loans, banking, housing, things like that, jobs. But that is not mutually exclusive with the fact that people are walking up to police officers on the street and shooting them in the back of the head. I mean, the two issues are not mutually exclusive. And, you know, I think that people need to remember that. It's not a yeah, but conversation.
Right. Right. For instance. No, right. Exactly.
It's just not. It's so much deeper than that. And I think it doesn't need to be so polarizing, you know?
For sure. For sure. So, you know, let's get on to a topic where we can assist our viewers. We've gotten some questions. One of the questions that we've seen is relative to this COVID contact tracing. What is our opinion regarding it? And do you think it's will be successful or not? Who would like to talk about that?
I don't know enough about it, to be honest with you. Everything that I've glanced over has been like an optional, like you can opt out thing. But I guess I think about like if this was a flesh-eating bacteria, I'd be having that app on my phone.
Right.
So what, you know, I don't know. I kind of wait for like a more final version of things to come out before I read them. I don't know if that's a flaw or a smart move on my behalf. But until something's like, oh, you're going to be required to do this, I'm just like, if I can opt out, I'm not even looking at it.
So do you think, I was going to say, Hugh, do you think it's going to be mandated by law that all of us have to have this contact tracing and we can't get into any establishment without it?
And that's the bigger question. I mean, contact tracing has been going on with the CDC for ever. I mean, ever since they knew they could do this. So, I mean, they're doing it currently. It's just a matter of the accuracy of that contact tracing and how they go about doing it. I mean, that's, you know, a few months ago when we were talking about the supercell areas of COVID, where the girl from Grosse Pointe went to a bar in Lansing and infected 108 people, allegedly. So how do you trace that? So they are tracing it. They're trying to figure out, okay, where's the common denominator? They've been doing that with infectious diseases ever since they've been studying infectious diseases. The question now comes, because Apple and Google have these apps you can download that say whether you've had COVID, if you have COVID symptoms, or if you've been vaccinated with certain vaccinations. And are you going to have to show your phone and say, hey, here's my vaccination record, I can come in now, or not? That's the bigger question, and whether you can restrict somebody if they don't have that. God, that opens up such a big can of worms. I don't even know what to say. I mean, I think that's unconstitutional. I don't think you're allowed to do that, but that hasn't stopped the legislation from passing laws to that effect before. And as a private business, am I now allowed to say, hey, I'm not going to allow you into my place of business unless you can show me on your app that you are not infected, or that you've been tested and you tested negative? I mean, that's again the bigger question, and whether that's legal for the private businesses to do it. I think they can. I mean, again, it's a private business. They can say who they can allow in and who they can't, as long as it's not, based on a protected class, race, or religion, or something like that. If it has to do with the public safety and the safety of their employees and other patrons, then I think they can restrict the people. So,
well, I think we're going to see more of that. And I know in California, for instance, that more and more businesses are requiring you to have this app on your phone, and so that they can check prior to your entrance into a particular establishment. And so even though they're not mandating that this app be on the phone, they're essentially making it so that you can't get anywhere without it. And so although it's not technically required by law to have it as an individual, you're not going to be able to do anything unless you do.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And
so, it's like now where, years ago, we never used to be able to have to go through, security, or these metal detectors before entering the courthouses or these large stadiums or public, large public places, concerts, sports facilities, etc. Now we do. So do you think this is going to be the new norm? Not only do you go through security, but you have to get your temperature checked or check your app on your phone.
I think it will be.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be, and the bigger question is, what does the entities that are collecting this data do with it? I mean, if you do test positive for COVID or some other disease or illness, is that information disseminated to everybody so everyone else knows? That'd be a bigger question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's someone's right to privacy versus the public danger they may pose are always a battle, and have been since we founded this country. I mean,
right. And speaking of founding this country, we've heard so much about a lot of our historical monuments and references to names of, people, and people, famous people from our history books and everything. It even talking about our Constitution, being changed or amended or doing away with. What can both of you speak to that, and how do you think that this is helping the state of our nation today?
Do you mean by people wanting monuments and statues taken down and things like that?
Yeah, and changing the history as we have known it, and also our Constitution.
I don't necessarily think it's changing the history as we know it. I think the history has been written in books by a certain perspective, and I think that there's a perspective that's missing that is now appropriate. I guess it's always been appropriate, but now it is being pushed to be shared as well. So I think if you talk to somebody that lived during the Civil War and you talk to someone from the North and someone from the South, they would have, it's just like in a divorce. Why your marriage failed, two completely different stories, 100% every time. you know?
Well, we always say there's three sides to every story, right?
Yeah. And so I think,
yeah.
I think that it's one perspective has been shared, and there are other sides of things. Like, as Americans, we tend to sweep things under the rug that make us uncomfortable. Like, that's an American thing. So I think that it's not inappropriate for a different side of the same history to be shared. I mean, there's a lot of groups that are not, their history, their part in that history is not shared on the mainstream. And I think that if you give all the sides to the story and let people make their own opinions about it, that's sharing knowledge.
Right. And knowledge is power is what we always say, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that, Sam, but at the same time, I 100% disagree with the destruction and vandalism of monuments and national statues of people that were important in our history. Well, regardless of what they did, they were still important figures in our history. I mean, you know, that's you can look at any country in the world and they still have monuments and statues of people that other people might not like. I mean, throughout France, there's still a ton of statues regarding Napoleon. Well, Napoleon was one of the biggest tyrants and dictators that France ever had, but he's still part of the French history and still is celebrated as the emperor of France for a period of time, and it's part of history. But you know, he killed a lot of people and was discriminatory in doing so. And same with Stalin. I mean, how many people is Stalin known to have killed? And there's still tons of statues about Stalin throughout Russia. So I mean, it's still part of our history, good, bad, or ugly. It is part of our history, and to destroy that or vandalize it destroys our history.
What do you think about the legalization of Facebook right now, censoring so many people that Facebook, founders don't agree with? Do you think that's legal?
No. Not really. Make it simple. No. Yeah. But I guess it goes back to
free speech, right? Freedom of speech. But is it because it's a private company that they're allowed to do that?
It is, and that's the auspice or the guys that they're hiding behind. But at the same time, is Facebook now considered a news media outlet, which shouldn't censor these things and really isn't allowed to, or is it a private company that's allowed to censor its members and what they put on there? And
it's interesting to me when people think that they're so open-minded, and Facebook is supposed to be such an open-minded forum, and we see a lot of this in politics. Obviously, people who are, they say they're open-minded are typically the ones that are not as open-minded, and they're not as open to hearing other people's opinions. And, I believe that our country is strong enough to withstand so many different opinions. It takes, if we were all the same, it would be such a boring place to live, right? And we have to learn how to respect one another's opinions without tearing them down in the process, and really try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And why do you believe the way you believe and what you believe? And we need to help empower our viewers so that they can understand and truly put themselves in somebody else's shoes to really understand that perspective. And when Facebook or other large organizations, censor all of people's perceptions and opinions, they're undermining the very nature of our country, in my opinion. Sam, can you talk about that a little bit?
I think the Facebook algorithm is flawed, and I think people make it a lot bigger deal than it really is. I mean, I know someone that got put in Facebook jail because she commented "men are stupid" on a post about somebody's ex-husband, and she got flagged for hate speech. But then you have people that put actual hate speech and they don't get flagged. So I think that society is fragile right now. And I think that comes out in something like conspiracy theories.
Well,
So I know several have tried to get, certain things out, and again, we're not political here, but, many members of the very conservative African American community are censored all the time, and they're not allowed on Facebook for some reason. And I don't know why that is.
I just think it's a weird algorithm.
I find it most interesting when you get on Facebook, someone will post something that somebody doesn't like, and they'll get 5,000 other people onto their bandwagon that somehow or another was offensive. So then Facebook will take it down and put you in, as Sam put it, Facebook jail. But, if nobody comments on it, then it's okay. And I think it almost takes like a snowballing effect. And I think that's one of the things that makes the Facebook algorithms flawed is it's not censoring people necessarily because of what they say. They're censoring people because of other people's reaction to it, which I think is wrong. And like you were saying, the open-minded people, I had this discussion with my daughter the other day, the people that profess to be open-minded seem to be only open-minded as long as you agree with them. And they'll be the first ones to call you out if you disagree with them. If your opinion is different than theirs, then you're the closed-minded person that doesn't see things right. And I'm like,
exactly.
That goes against exactly what you're preaching. But, and you can't handle it if someone disagrees with you. And so you start this campaign on Facebook or Twitter or wherever to get you censored because you don't agree with them.
It's like the saying, he who doth protest too much, is usually the guilty one, right? So
I just went back in my Facebook Messenger. I found a friend of mine that got kicked off of Facebook for 7 days because she posted a video of her dog climbing under the bed covers, and they flagged it for sexual content. I mean, I just watched it again. It is the dog.
Wow.
My friend is sitting on her bed videoing the dog, and the dog is going under the comforter to make a little burrow to lay and take a nap, and they flagged it and suspended her for 7 days for sexual content.
So they think that she was having sex with the dog? That's pretty sick.
I mean, it's a very clear video. The dog was going under there to take a nap. There was no people under there. There was no body parts under there. And, so it's like, who really knows? I don't think there's someone that sits at Facebook and scrolls through millions of posts every day to be like, I don't like you. Your haircut sucks. I hate your shirt. We're flagging your, you know what I mean? But like I said, society's fragile right now. So when people are experiencing, if an opinion post like that does get flagged, they're thinking Facebook's trying to censor me, but also so is a video of a dog climbing under a comforter to take a nap, and saying men are stupid is considered hate speech. So.
Right.
No, it's like you got to take everything with a grain of salt, I feel like.
Right. No, right. I know. Well, getting back to some of our legal topics, we've had some questions coming in since we've been talking.
On our Thursday tangent.
Yeah. What should we plan as co-parents to prepare for the possibility of homeschooling again in the fall? Should we have agreements again relative to who homeschools who, or I know this came up a lot for us with our clients, and it's very important to maintain the orders of the court, but also you have to make sure that children, are comfortable and really having a normal school experience as best as possible. I know in my household, to keep it easier for the kids so that they could keep their books in one place and all of their belongings in one place, and their schooling and normal for them. I homeschooled, and it was better for the children. And so as soon as school was done, if it was their dad's night, they went to their dad's, but then he'd bring them back for school, quote unquote school. And it was a lot on me, but I did that for the children to be healthy and safe and happy. And so did he. So we compromised there, but I know a lot of parents can't do it that way. So Sam, I know you did that as well for the most part. You homeschooled, Easton. Hugh, I know your daughters went back and forth. So, yours are a little older. So what can you talk to our viewers about regarding a potential stay-home order again in the fall?
Uh, I think homeschooling is kind of a misnomer as well, because usually, I mean, in the past, homeschooling meant your children weren't going to school and you were taking on the responsibility of teaching your children whatever academics they needed. And under the law, you were allowed to do that, and they could still pass from one grade to the next if they passed whatever tests the state mandated. I think homeschooling now, and it's what you're stating, Sabrina, is not necessarily the traditional homeschooling. It's more making sure your kids are doing what the school they're supposed to be in but aren't right now is teaching them. So like in my situation, my kids were older, they are older, but they were going online with their computers and they were communicating with their teachers from their school. Some of them were holding like Zoom classes. Some were doing online sessions or giving out homework assignments that you then would have to turn in a day or two. And that was my homeschooling for them. I mean, I wasn't the one actively there teaching them the lesson. I was basically creating an environment. I actually bought a couple of desks and said, okay, this is where you put your computer when you're doing your work. You're not sitting in the TV room or down in the basement or whatever. You're here during this time of day in front of your computer doing your schoolwork. That was my version of homeschooling. I wasn't the one there actually teaching them, what 1 + 1 is, or because I don't know.
I was. I was. And it was true homeschooling, let me tell you.
and my ex-wife, who I shared custody with, and yes, the kids were going back and forth, she is a school teacher. And she was basically doing the same thing I was. She was not, teaching them the lessons that they needed to learn for those particular academics. She was just making sure that they were logging on, getting the assignments they needed to get, and doing those assignments. And it was a challenge. I mean, it was interesting because one of our children was insistent, oh yeah, I'm all caught up, I did what I needed to do, I'm going to go play now. And then 3 days later we look on the parent portal and say, hey, you got 6 assignments missing, what happened? Oh, I thought I did them. So we learned we had to keep up on that on a daily basis rather than a weekly basis. But the homeschooling thing, I think if it does come down to that, will be more of, I think the school systems will be doing a lot more online. I think they will have some virtual classrooms set up. I think they will be sending out emails and or assignments either through text or emails, and the students will have to learn either going through the textbooks themselves or the online learning resources that the schools have and turning in those assignments. It won't be the parent actually teaching the academics.
Well, I think that goes to the grade of the student also. The lower the grade, obviously, the more the parent has to be involved. And I know for me, that's exactly how it was for me. Although the school did a great job, it was still, you had to teach. I had to teach my youngest son daily, and my middle and older, like you said, you just had to be more on top of them. But in terms of our viewers, relative to this, co-parenting, I think it's important that they know that they do have to continue to abide by the orders, but also if they come up with their own agreements for the betterment of the children. And again, what we believe is paramount is the well-being of our children. And that's what we stress all the time. And that's what our, workshops are designed around. We have to make sure that whatever, the children have to be, as safe and as comfortable and their needs met as much as possible, not being the one always in control, but taking account of their needs. Sam, you would like to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas where putting aside your pride as a parent is most important because, I think that what we're all talking about, our own personal experiences, is the difference between public school and private school as well. A friend of mine has a child that's in private school, and her requirements as a parent in teaching, like the hands-on teaching, were much more stringent, and the child's workload was much more stringent than what we experienced in the public school. And I could not praise Easton's teacher more. I mean, I can't even find the words for Easton's teacher, because when it turned into, okay, we're not coming back this year, She kicked it into high gear. She made videos of herself teaching lessons. She uploaded them on Google Classroom. She was available 24 hours a day. She was checking in on the kids. She had office hours. She was scheduling weekly one-on-one meetings if the kids wanted them or the parents needed them. She was giving us extra ideas on things we could focus on with the kids, because teaching new material virtually is very difficult when you're not, the kids aren't used to learning that way.
Right.
So I think that this is where the parents can really challenge themselves to co-parent better and to come up with a plan. Maybe it makes more sense for one parent to do the teaching versus the other. Maybe the kids are more responsive to one parent or the other. Maybe going back and forth is better, and showing a continuity between the households is more beneficial for the child. We went through 4 different plans before we found one that worked for Easton. And we found one that worked, and it was a balance of keeping him engaged, keeping the new content coming, and balancing things that he enjoyed doing. Kids get recess. They get to go to specials. They get to go to art, music, technology lab, gym. So you have to remember that that's what they're used to. And so when you're making your schedule for your kids, it's okay to say, Mom, the other parent, not myself, might be better equipped for the betterment of my child's education. And that doesn't make you a bad parent or a worse parent or a better parent. It's just saying, where's my kid going to thrive? Because depending on where your child is in the span of state required education, K through 12. I mean, in 4th grade, it was okay. This year, I'm kind of nervous if we have to do homeschooling, to be honest with you, because, Easton personally is very bright and he's ahead, but I'm afraid that without the consistency he was getting in his school, he could fall behind. And that makes me nervous for the transition from elementary to middle.
Right. Do you think, we've had some questions about masks. Do you think, now that the governor is requiring masks, that all the children will have to wear masks in the fall?
They might. I think it's likely that they would have to. I don't know if they'll make them wear them all day, every day, but walking through the halls, going to a bathroom break, things like that. I don't know that they'll make the kids sit there and learn with them on when they're in their respective classrooms. But in our school district, I mean, the average class size is like 26 to 30 kids.
Right.
So
The governor is now seeking assistance with law enforcement to ticket non-mask wearing citizens. Hugh, what do you think about that?
I think you're going to have a hard time getting most of the county sheriffs to go along with that one. I mean, we've already seen some of the sheriffs, especially in the northern districts of Michigan, basically flat out telling the governor, I'm not going to enforce these rules, and I'm not going to have my officers go out there and try and pull people over and ticket them. I mean, again, even now, I understand the coronavirus stuff and the dangers of it and wearing the mask. I get that. I'm not complaining about wearing a mask when I'm going grocery shopping or out in public, but I still kind of laugh to myself when I see people driving in their car alone wearing a mask. I'm like, what are you why are you wearing a mask while you're driving in your car by yourself? So I mean, if people are out in a public place, such as in a grocery store or whatever, and they're not wearing a mask, can the police ticket them then? I think that's reasonable. I think they should be able to. Whether they will or not, I don't know. And I mean, we've already seen in the news a couple of times where store or patrons have been tackled by the police or security for refusing to wear a mask when they're in shopping. And that goes back to the private business. Can they require you to wear a mask if you're there shopping? And if you don't, what is their right? Their right is to ask you to leave. If you refuse to leave, what can they do? Well, then they can call the police and you can be forcibly removed.
Well, we recently, we have a friend of the firm who was unfortunately assaulted because he was not wearing a mask on the outside of a store. And a woman who was very irate about that was escorting him, and then she had a mask on, but as she was walking out of the store, basically assaulted him by coughing in his face. Now, we have seen the law in this area, similar area, where if you spit on somebody, that's an assault. That's a clear assault. Now, we don't have the law yet that has caught up to our COVID cases regarding coughing on somebody. Now, if damages ensued as a result of that, let's just say he got sick right after that and we could trace it back and prove that it was because of this cough, then he has a cause of action. But unfortunately now there is no cause of action. So, unfortunately, that behavior obviously is so wrong. But, Sam, I know you know this person personally. And so what can you talk to about our viewers about this and how crazy this woman was that she coughed on him? But, obviously she was judging him for not wearing a mask, but he was outside. What can you talk to about that?
I think that just kind of goes to like, for what purpose? What purpose does that serve? Like, we all have so much going on in our lives that why would you spend your energy causing chaos for someone else? Whether because there's people that don't wear masks, and I might judge you if you're in public and you're not wearing a mask and you're walking around breathing and touching on everything. And then, you see people like they'll go touch something, touch their mouth, touch their face, touch their phone, whatever. But it's like, it's kind of like a mind your own business kind of thing. You can have an opinion on it. I can do this, but should I? I mean, right. I don't know what would possess somebody to go cough in someone's face during a time like this. Ever, really? I don't know what would possess someone to go cough in someone's face ever, because it's a huge violation of your personal space, and it's gross, quite frankly. But it's like, whether someone's wearing a mask or not, like whether you agree with it or not, that's really their business. I mean, there also was a security guard at a store where the lady was refused entry because she didn't have a mask on, and she drove back up to the store with her husband, and the security guard got shot and killed. Like, really? Yeah, I don't understand. I'm not that kind of person, so I don't understand that.
Well, I think that goes to what we talked at the beginning of our hour, how people are just at their maximum capacity for overwhelm. They are so tapped out, and we see it in all of our most of our cases now. We see it in the national news with all of these riots. We see it in law enforcement that are overreaching in terms of how they're reacting to things. We've seen it, and obviously not all. I don't want to overgeneralize, but we've seen so much overwhelm in our society right now. And I think that coughing in someone's face or, doing what you just said, I mean, it's people are reacting to the point where they're just not thinking. They're losing it and they're becoming loose cannons. And my fear for our state, especially because obviously Michigan is where we live, but nationally, if our government continues to, force these stay-home orders, I fear that it's going to create mass chaos on a national level. And I think we can prevent all that.
Well, to some extent, I think it already has.
Yeah. I mean, and the question, I mean, I don't know how long we can continue sustaining this. I mean, we were talking about the stay-at-home school, homeschooling and stuff, and people staying at home and continuing having to do that. We have to look at the economical impact of that as well. I mean, fortunately, my kids are old enough that I can leave them at home and go into the office if I need to. But what if you're a single parent with no support on the other side at all? The father or mother of your children is no longer in the picture at all. Well, you're the only breadwinner for you and your children. You have to go work. What are you going to do if you have a toddler through 13-year-old that you can't leave at home, but you have to go to work? I mean, you can't stay home and homeschool them because you got to go to work. Who's going to even watch them? Who's going to school them? Who's going to? And again, this all goes to the boiling point, the stress factor that these people are seeing. I mean, it's no good answer. There just isn't.
I know we got a little off topic, but I wanted to get back to some of our questions regarding some of the tenant issues, the landlord-tenant issues. Hugh, I know earlier we spoke about, with the governor's orders and the fact that some of the executive orders are still in place. How is that helping or hurting landlords or tenants now?
Well, actually, the Michigan Supreme Court has put forth a process to open up evictions again, and the courts are supposed to proceed with eviction proceedings now, but they've actually put forth like a step process. So basically, that they've prioritized evictions, and if the landlord believes that the tenant is engaged in illegal drug activity, or has been documented in a police report that they are damaging the property or something of that nature, they're supposed to take priority. Or if they're causing extensive damage to the property or injury to other tenants or other like property. So those are like in the first class that are supposed to be prioritized. Then in the second class are where a complaint alleges non-payment to rent for 120 days or longer. The next set is 90 days or longer. Fourth set of classes is 60 days or longer, and then 30 days or longer. So basically it's supposed to prioritize the cases within that court in that order. So it has to take care of all the ones that deal with the illegal drug activity and damage to the property before it can move into ones where it's just non-payment of rent. And then it goes by duration of that non-payment of rent before they can prioritize. So if you have a tenant that hasn't paid rent for 30 days, that case probably won't get heard for another 60 days. So then now is it 90 days that they haven't paid rent for or not? I don't know.
Right.
But it also prioritized the cases that were filed prior to the COVID restrictions being put in place. And if you did have a case filed that was pending but then got put on hold because of COVID, there's a new form that the courts have pumped out that you have to fill out that realleges and updates the complaint, because obviously, if they weren't paying rent and you're trying to evict them back in April, I would be hard pressed to believe that they said, oh, okay, and have started paying rent during the COVID time. So now they're probably 180 days beyond rent. So you got to update your complaint basically, and those get in that high priority rate level as well.
Yeah. So it's pretty involved. So, we would recommend our viewers, if you are a landlord or a tenant, and you need help on either side, we're helping all of our, clients on both sides of it. So, the law is ever changing, and we don't know. We're faced with new things on a daily basis. And I think that's part of our concern right now, and a lot of the fear and a lot of the anxiety in people is because of the unknown, with the fall and all this talk about resurgence and all this talk about not knowing what tomorrow will bring. I'm going to take one last question. And so the question, unfortunately, it goes again to people's behavior. And it's about a common, a business, Starbucks. What do you think about Starbucks and their employees constantly disrespecting police officers? A bloody tampon was put in a drink. Why won't Starbucks step up and fire these disgusting employees? Well, who wants to take this one? It's a loaded question.
Did they prove it was a bloody tampon?
I don't know.
If any employee of any business is tampering with somebody's food, they should be fired, regardless of whether the recipient is a police officer or a regular person.
For sure.
Yeah,
it's as
simple as that.
Yeah, it goes beyond logic to do something of that nature. And if it's directed, personally, I think if that's directed towards a police officer, it should be treated as a hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's a definition. They're purposely doing something against somebody else because of their profession.
Right. Yeah, it's so sad, it's just sad, the state of our country right now. And I just hope that we can get beyond it. I hope that by empowering people with knowledge, we can help effectuate some of this change that our country so desperately needs. So, it's unfortunate, but anyway, I'd like to leave our viewers with a little hope and a little takeaway that they can leave our, short time with them with. And so, Hugh, why don't you start? And whatever you'd like to say to our viewers, give our viewers some hope that they can take away.
I guess the hope that I have to give to our viewers is, even though these executive orders keep coming down and going out, I think that the numbers are there showing that this coronavirus is either steadying out. The deaths are definitely going down. The ratio of death versus positive testing has gone way down. And I think the hospitals and CDC has a much better control over right now. So I think we're going to continue to see it go down. Even if there is a resurgence, I think we'll be much better equipped to deal with it than we were before. And I don't think it'll be as much of a panic mode as it was when this first hit back in April.
Thank you, Hugh. And Sam, what would you like to tell our viewers today?
I feel like I say the same thing every week, but really just, remember that everyone is going through a lot right now. Try and let logic and reason control your responses rather than emotion. And, sometimes it's okay to just leave stuff alone. Sometimes no response is the best response. And I like to encourage people to think about that.
Thank you so much. And to all of you out there, you've seen us, you've heard us week after week. We are here for you. We are your attorneys to help you through this time and all times. You've now seen Hugh several times and Samantha several times. You've seen me. You know what we're all about. Hopefully one of our personalities will resonate with you. We're here for you 24/7. And please call us 248-258-3500. Please like our Facebook page. Please go to our YouTube channel where we're uploading content regularly. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being a part of our family. And from our homes and our office to yours, we wish you a very great day. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Bye.